Prepare to have your health questions answered here on Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley, owner of Binkley Healing Center in downtown Ventura. Now, here's Dr. Todd.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley, board-certified doctor of non-force chiropractic and practitioner of functional medicine. Today we're going to talk about microplastics, tiny little plastics that many of us are eating and drinking every day. Why it's important. More and more research is coming out demonstrating how important and why it is so important to stop eating plastic and stop drinking plastic or even breathing plastic in from the air. These microplastics, anything smaller than 5 millimeters is considered a microplastic. Some of these things are deliberately manufactured to be tiny, such as microbeads found in some cosmetics. But most of them come from the inevitable wear and tear of larger plastic material like plastic bags, water bottles, plastic packaging, car tires, synthetic fibers like polyester, fishing equipment, even paint. So plastics were first engineered at the turn of the 20th century, but they really came into widespread use in the 1950s because they're cheap and are versatile, do so many different things. Since then, the plastics production has increased 230-fold, and most of this plastic never fully decomposes. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces over decades. And these things are being found almost everywhere now. They're ubiquitous in the environment. They're in agricultural soil, they're in groundwater, they're in the ocean. They've been found in chicken, fish, pork, cows, tofu, apples, pears, carrots, lettuce, broccoli, potatoes. They're in the water we drink. They literally rain down on us, and we inhale them as airborne particulate matter. We wear them as synthetic fibers like nylon and polyester. They can enter the bloodstream and IV infusions. The hospitals are full of plastic bags and tubing that directly cause plastics to enter our bloodstreams, and they've been found embedded in virtually every human organ. So teasing out the health impacts of this requires a lot of study. There's a lot of new information coming out about that. There's no control group. You can't have a control group and give one person plastic and not the other one. But other studies, animal studies and human studies, more and more information is coming out over the months and years, especially recently. Exposure to microplastics has been associated with endocrine system disruption. That's one of the main ones. They screw up your hormones, your hormone production, and your body's response to normal hormones. Weakened immune systems, developmental aberrations, irregular reproductive organ development. And they exert their damage partly through local and chronic inflammation once lodged in tissue. And plastics are often coated with chemicals, so the chemicals leach into the surrounding tissue once you ingest the plastic. So here's an interesting study. In 2024, researchers followed patients undergoing carotid surgery. The carotid arteries are the arteries in your neck that are the main blood supply to the brain. And when they do the surgery where they go in and remove the plaque from those arteries to reduce your risk of having a stroke, if you're starting to have transient ischemic attacks, minor strokes, or if you have high risk of a stroke and they do an ultrasound and find that you have a lot of plaque in those arteries, they'll go in and scrape that out. And they found that those who have microplastics embedded in those plaques had a significantly higher rate of heart attack, stroke, and death 3 years later. Wow. So this plastic stuff is getting embedded in the plaque in your arteries. And if you have more of that, those with the most microplastics in their plaque have a significantly higher rate of heart attack and stroke 3 years later. More recently, from 2016 to 2024, brains from autopsies were evaluated for concentration of plastics in their brain tissue. And the concentrations of plastics in the brain were significantly higher among individuals diagnosed with dementia compared to those without. Also, the plastics in the brain tissue increased as much as 50% from 2016 to 2024, consistent with this increasing ongoing environmental exposure. More and more plastics are entering our systems all the time. So in these brains that they studied over an 8-year period, from 2016 to 2024, there was 50% higher concentration of plastics. And it dramatically increased the risk of dementia in those patients. And these plastics are everywhere. Just tires and garbage are constantly shedding tiny pieces of plastic that then float up into the air, creating a form of air pollution that we're all exposed to. Researchers at UC San Francisco did a review of some 3,000 studies and found that these particles are implicated in serious health problems involving male and female infertility, colon cancer, poor lung function, lung inflammation, It can increase your risk of lung cancer and other forms of damage to harm to reproductive and digestive health. So the jury is in. It's really important to start paying more attention to this stuff. Most of us know that it's not good. Plastics are not good, not good to eat or drink plastic, but a lot of people don't realize how much they already are literally eating, drinking, and breathing in plastic. So this is also, before we get into the specifics, this is really important for younger generations because younger generations are getting exposed to more plastic in their lifetimes than ever before, and that is all signs are that's likely to increase. So the easy one that everyone should do is stop drinking water out of plastic bottles. There's so much exposure to plastic from people drinking water out of plastic bottles. If you have any sense of taste, you can usually taste the plastic when you open a plastic bottle of water. Those things, you see them being shipped, being unloaded from trucks that have driven across the desert and 100-degree plus heat sometimes, and then they'll sit on pallets outside some big box store in the sun. The more that you heat the plastic, any plastic, the more it's going to leach into the food or the water, any other liquid that's in direct contact with it. So it's really important to always avoid anything that combines heat and plastic around your food or anything you're drinking. But the bottled water is guaranteed to be exposing you to plastic. Bottled water has 20 times more microplastics than tap water. And it's cheaper in the long run just to get a good filter and then fill glass or steel bottles and drink your water out of glass or steel, stainless steel, metal, any kind of metal container, instead of plastic. Just cut the plastic out of the picture. That's the most important way to dramatically limit your ingestion of plastic if you're drinking water out of plastic bottles. So it's also important just to look around the kitchen, anywhere you store and eat and cook your food. So that means using wooden cooking utensils and cutting boards instead of plastic ones, using tinfoil or wax paper. If you're going to heat something in the oven, use tinfoil. You're not going to usually put plastic in the oven anyway, but storing things with tinfoil as a lid or wax paper. If you're going to microwave, if you're going to heat something in the microwave, don't put saran wrap on the container. Use wax paper instead. And if you're I don't recommend really cooking in the microwave much at all. It's better to cook your food. I like to do most of my cooking in a toaster oven or on the stove. But if you are going to reheat something in the microwave, or if you're going to get any kind of a frozen dinner or pre-cooked food and heat it up in the microwave, take it out of whatever paper or plastic container that it comes in and put it in a glass bowl, like a Pyrex bowl, and then cover that with wax paper. That way you don't get any exposure to plastic while that food's being heated and while you're eating it, while it's hot. So anytime you expose the plastic to heat, you're going to be ingesting more of that plastic. So it's okay to store food and even water in plastic bottles as long as it's not cold, overnight in your fridge, for example. If you have room temperature water, and if you don't have any stainless steel or glass bottles, and you put room temperature water from your water filter into a plastic bottle to take with you, that's not so bad. If it doesn't get hot, then it's not going to and it's not a super soft plastic, and leave it in your car where it's going to get hot and exposed to, in the sun or in a hot car, it's going to, you don't want to do that. If you're going to carry a bottle of water in your car, make it a glass or a stainless steel bottle, not plastic. But, sometimes it's just hard to find an alternative. So if you're going to put something overnight storage, for example, food with a plastic lid, not really a problem. And even storing some liquids in plastic, if it's in your fridge, especially, you're going to get, and it's not in there very long, then you're going to get much less exposure to plastic from that. But ideally, minimize it as much as possible. And if you have these plastic containers, don't stick them in the dishwasher. Wash them by hand, again, just to avoid the heat. The water in dishwashers is much, much hotter. So heating plastic is just leaching the chemicals out and breaking down the plastic material even faster, making it more likely to leach into the food or beverages that you're going to put in. This includes baby bottles. A lot of people stick the baby bottle into the microwave to warm that up. Much better to use glass. Here in California, we're not using as many plastic bags as we used to. Most of us take canvas bags or some kind of cloth bag into the store when shopping, or get paper bags there. Avoid using the plastic bags wherever you can, because they are really soft plastics that break down really easily, and the more people use them, the more of those end up breaking down and becoming airborne pollution. Those horrible single-use plastic bags are a huge source of airborne plastic all of us then end up breathing. Another great way to avoid or reduce your consumption of plastic is just to avoid ultra-processed foods, junk food, any food that comes wrapped in plastic, potato chips, cakes, cookies, crackers, so many foods come wrapped in plastic. Try to find foods that are not wrapped in plastic. Even vegetables and fruits come wrapped in plastic far too often. Try to get the ones that are not wrapped in plastic. And finally, take good care of your health so that you don't end up in a hospital. Hospitals are teeming with plastic aprons, IV tubes and bags, syringes, plastic gloves, packaging for different materials, plastic bottles and utensils and devices. A quarter of the trash hospitals produce is plastic, and hospitals produce a lot of trash. So that's a lot of plastic. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You're listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Health Challenge. If you just tuned in, we were reviewing some of the latest literature showing how important it is to start to spend a little more time and effort reducing your exposure to plastics, especially plastic food and beverage containers and anything that involves cooking, especially avoiding any type of contact with food or beverages that are heated or in contact with heat in a plastic packaging or container. Here's a great study that just came out in this week's news, published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. It was done in Japan, but just published last month, September 2025, a review of over 1.5 million people without any form of cardiovascular disease. This is from a database gathered from April 2014 to November 2022, so 8.5 year period with constipation, individuals with no cardiovascular disease, but with constipation. So people that had constipation had a much higher risk. They looked for associations between people who had constipation and whether or not they had a heart attack, angina, the chest pain that's associated with strain on the heart, strokes, heart failure, atrial fibrillation, and a composite of all of these forms of cardiovascular disease. And the result was that constipation was associated with a 30% increased risk of all cardiovascular diseases and a 32% increased risk of heart failure. So heart failure doesn't mean your heart stops. Heart failure is a common cause, a natural, quote-unquote, natural cause of death. It's when your heart basically is worn out, can no longer keep up with demand, or is weak. It doesn't have to be permanent. Sometimes it's reversible if you take good care of yourself. But heart failure just means the pump is failing to keep up with demand. So who knew? Constipation increases your risk of heart attacks and strokes, 30%. And heart failure. So heart failure is, most commonly happens as you get older. So the major risk factor for heart failure is just being old. But in having repeated minor heart events, mini strokes, chest pain, any of the things that can, atrial fibrillation, anything that puts strain on your heart is going to increase your risk of eventually having heart failure. And being constipated increases your risk of all these things. So if you're frustrated about being constipated, here's another good reason to do something about that. There's lots of ways that you can completely eliminate constipation without becoming dependent on Metamucil or stool softeners for the rest of your life. When people come into my office who have constipation, I'm going to look at a whole host of things on their blood work that could be contributing to constipation. And sometimes it's just a few basics like insufficient vitamin D, insufficient protein in their diet, insufficient fiber in their diet. There's some basic things that many people can easily do to change. And even just taking a little bit of supplemental magnesium. A lot of people are deficient in magnesium, and a little bit of supplemental magnesium can help with that. There are a bunch of other things that are less common. And then ultimately, if the basics don't do it, then a stool test can identify whether or not you have some kind of gut bug, a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, worms, fungus, anything, yeast, anything that can disrupt the normal gut microbiome can cause constipation. And especially if you're on the seesaw where you have constipation and diarrhea. Oh, one day it goes back and forth. That's really frustrating and confusing. You'd think you'd have one or the other. And some people go back and forth, and that's usually because you have some kind of bad bug in your gut. And it's creating an inflammatory process that is constantly changing, but results in the inability for your colon to do its job and form normal consistency stool. So yeah, get that stuff checked out. Here's another good reason. If you're having constipation, do something about it. I'd love to help you with that. So you can obviously become more comfortable, but you'll also be reducing your risk of heart attack and stroke. We've got some more great studies to talk about here today, and if we have time, I'll talk about a case study or two. But before I do that, I want to talk about something that just occurred to me. So I had a patient last week who was under a lot of stress and was complaining about how angry they would get just as something as simple as not being able to find their keys is raising their blood pressure. And I see that people come in, and it's so something as simple as that. Here's a way one way to consider reducing your stress. If you find that you're constantly wasting energy and aggravation looking for something, keys is a common one. It's really simple. Just put your keys in the same place every day. Just take that extra second to put your keys on a hook, in a little bowl, on a little table, somewhere near the door, ideally, wherever you're going to find it every day, and always only put your keys there. When you walk in, just drop them there immediately so you'll always be able to find them. But there's lots of other things that I've found myself frustrated looking for over time, like scissors. Do you only have one pair of scissors? Have you ever wanted a pair of scissors and wondered where it was and walked around for hours trying to find it? Easy solution. Same thing if you find yourself frustrated looking for a pen or pencil and you can't find one, or a Post-it note, or a Sharpie to mark something on a box, or a box cutter to open a box, or a highlighter to highlight things. Anything that you find yourself when you want something and it's not right there, ready to just reach out and jump into your hand when you need it, buy 6 of those things. They're cheap. Put a pair of scissors in your kitchen and in your workroom, wherever, any place you use a pair of scissors, or a pen or a pencil, or a box cutter. But just get a bunch of those things and spread them around so that there's always one anywhere you might ever want to use it. Simple way to reduce one stressor, one source of frustration from your life. Have you ever had a calcium score done? A coronary artery calcification test? This is the CAT scan where you're in the tube for a brief period of time. They just do a couple of slices, low radiation, and they can see the calcium in your arteries in your heart. So if you know anybody that's ever had that done, if you've had it done, there's been some controversy around it. Plaque is made up of fibrin, scar tissue that occurs from inflammation. That's why it's not caused by cholesterol, but it is made of cholesterol. If you have a lot of inflammation creating a lot of micro tears in your blood vessels, then your body forms a scab, a type of a scab to heal those little micro tears, and that is made of scar tissue. Fibrin is the main type of collagen-like fiber that forms the scar to heal the tear, and then that becomes embedded with calcium and cholesterol. So calcium and cholesterol increase in those plaques as they grow. And one of the ways to measure that is to measure the plaque, to measure the calcium in that is with this CT, tube-like X-ray that can see the calcium in your arteries. And so, it's a useful test because if you have more of the calcified, it doesn't show the soft plaque. That's the controversy. So you can only see the calcium. You can only see the calcified parts of the plaque. You can't see the soft plaque. Well, it's the soft plaque that's growing and filling and closing off the artery long before it becomes hard enough to show up on an X-ray that blocks the arteries, and it's the soft plaque that can then erode and break off and cause a thrombus, cause a pulmonary embolism if it comes off from a vein in your leg, cause a stroke if it comes from your heart. It's going to go up to your brain and cause a stroke. So that softer plaque that breaks off easily, erodes or ruptures, that's what causes that's the most damaging form, and that doesn't show up at all when you get any kind of an X-ray or a CAT scan, or specifically this coronary artery calcification or calcium score. But in general, if the more calcified plaque you see on that test, the more you're likely to have the other types of softer plaque that you can't see on that test because they go together. So that's why people get that test. Some people think it's useless because it does not measure the worst type of, and especially in young people. So that's what there's a letter published in Cardiovascular Imaging, Journal of American Cardiology, Cardiovascular Imaging, talking about how some more data, review of the studies that they've done on autopsy. They took how many? I think it was 2,500 people. 5,000 adult autopsies, or they analyzed 3,130 hearts to see. They did the coronary artery score on them and then compared the plaque score, the coronary artery calcification, with the amount of the softer plaque that is prone to rupture and erosion that can cause a heart attack or stroke. What was the difference? Did it correlate directly? Well, what was the deal with that? So what they found is that in younger people, it doesn't really correlates very poorly. So you can have a very low calcium score or a zero, and it kind of makes sense. It hasn't been there. Everyone has plaque. Almost everyone has plaque. They find plaque in For decades ago, they found huge amounts of plaque and blockage in the arteries in returning soldiers when they did autopsies on returning soldiers going back decades from various wars. So depending on how lousy a diet you can have massive amounts of blocking in your arteries, even in your 20s. But the younger you are, the less likely you are to have plaque that has calcified. But depending on your lifestyle, you could still have a lot of the softer kind of plaque that can cause heart attacks and strokes. So the younger you are, the less likely the calcium score is going to correlate with the total amount of plaque that you have, and therefore your risk of heart attacks. Whereas as you get older, the more likely it is to compare. Calcium score is likely to represent your total burden. So it doesn't show you exactly what we would like to be able to see more easily on a scan. To see the actual amount of plaque or a blockage of an artery, you have to inject a dye in and do an x-ray of that dye, which will show a blockage directly. But in the meantime, this score is useful. I like to think of it, I've ordered it on patients. It's inexpensive. I think the last time I ordered one was about $150 at, that was at Grossman Imaging here in Ventura County. RadNet, Rolling Oaks, everything is Rolling Oaks now. They bought out Grossman. There's fewer places to go. I've had a lot of patients recently saying that they're having trouble getting in to get an appointment to get any kind of imaging done lately. But I think it's inexpensive to do. It's useful. I like to think of it as a way to motivate you, especially if you're in your 60s or 70s or older, or if you have had a lifestyle, eating a lot of red meat, cheese, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, a lot of inflammatory components of your diet, if you've eaten a lot of junk food or soda, or if you've smoked, drank a lot of alcohol, done anything that's going to increase inflammation throughout your body, it's going to increase your risk of cardiovascular disease, the formation of plaques. And so you can think of this calcium score as a way to find out if it's really important for you. It's a motivator to motivate you, say, hey, look, you can't argue with these x-rays. Now it's going to motivate you to take better care of yourself. Maybe come in and get some blood tests done, do a little bit more exercise, find a way to get rid of the pain that may be preventing you from doing more exercise, whatever it's going to take to motivate you to take better care of your health and directly reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. So I had a patient in her mid-60s who had this calcium score done. She came in. She wanted to know what does this mean? What does this score mean? So, well, you have a certain amount. I explained how it doesn't show the softer parts, the more dangerous types of plaque. And we also did a bunch of blood work on her, among other things, measuring markers for inflammation, like erythrocyte sedimentation rate. That's a kind of a mouthful, but there's a blood test that measures the viscosity or the thickness of your blood. And your blood gets thicker when you have a lot of inflammation. And there's also a test called CRP. Those are two of the markers of inflammation that I do on every patient. And so this woman had high cholesterol and slightly elevated inflammatory markers as well, especially the SED rate, this erythrocyte sedimentation rate, where both were elevated. And I tried to get her to eat a little bit better food. She already actually had a pretty good diet. She was exercising some, but not as much as she'd like. So she started exercising a little bit more, but not that much, not a huge change in her lifestyle. She didn't dramatically change her exercise or her diet. But what she did is took some supplements to control inflammation, like turmeric, and a product that's a rock star for lowering cholesterol called bergamot, BPF. It's from Orthomolecular Products. A few other things. And took about 6 months. I usually retest in 4 months, but I think it was 6 months with her. 6 months later, her total cholesterol went from 249 to 199, 50 points drop in the total cholesterol. And even more importantly, the bad cholesterol. This is harder to do. It's easier to reduce the total and get the HDL good cholesterol up. The hardest is to get the bad LDL cholesterol to come down where you want it. You want it ideally below 100, no more than 125 to be healthy. Of course, MDs would put you on statin drugs to lower. But we got her LDL bad cholesterol down also by 50 points in about 6 months, mainly just with some supplements that help your body stop forming as much cholesterol in the first place, reduce inflammation, and to a certain extent break down that old fibrin and remove some of that scar tissue that's contributing to plaque in the first place. Thank you for tuning in. Send me your questions. What would you like to hear more about on this show? I'd love to answer your question next week. Have a fantastic weekend.
You've been listening to Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley. If you have a health question you want discussed on the show, email your health questions to Dr. Binkley at binkleyhealingcenter.com. Take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions for yourself and for your loved ones, because our health matters. Join him next Friday at 2 p.m. for Safe, effective natural solutions here on 98.3 FM, The Word.